I was going to get everyone's attention, but we already got your attention. That's terrific. Thank you. My name's Stephen Bulger. I'm really delighted to have you here. I think most of you are here because of the Canadian Arts Hop that's going cross country, which is really exciting. As you know, that a lot of galleries sort of came out of people's mind through COVID, and so we're trying to do what we can to bring people like you back into the galleries. And we're so happy to have Shelley here to talk about her exhibition. As you can imagine, there's a lot of stories behind the stories that we can look at, and so she'll walk us through this. In advance of that, though, I would just like to acknowledge that we are located on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat and Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. This area is included in the One Dish, One Spoon Wampum Belt, a peace treaty dating back to before the 18th century, which is a mutual agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to share and care for the land and the resources around the Great Lakes. We all eat out of the dish, all of us who share this territory, with only one spoon. And this means we share the responsibility of ensuring the dish is never empty. This includes taking care of the land and the creatures we share it with. We are grateful to have this opportunity to live and work in this territory and across Turtle Island. This land acknowledgement is a process of deliberately naming that we work on and promote culture from diverse makers produced on Indigenous land, and that Indigenous peoples maintain their rights to this land. It provides us with an opportunity to reflect on all our relationships and the continuous process of improving these relationships. And I'd especially like to acknowledge Shelley's work for decades of making this happen. So without further ado, Shelley Niro. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And I would like to thank the Stephen Bulger Gallery for hosting my work in the gallery here, and the staff that has been looking after it. They are a great company to have looking after the work. I was born in Niagara Falls, New York. I moved to the Six Nations Reserve when I was about 4 or 5, and I grew up there, spending many years living there. Some of the work are a series, which are just sort of beginning. They're not really finished, but it's an example of where I'm heading, the direction I'm heading in. This work here is called History of the World, and History of the World has 4 elements in it, in each, or maybe 5, but each one has an Indian head nickel, and it has the Indian head and it has the buffalo, which is on the other side of that nickel. Between those 2 objects are an image of fossils, and I've been using fossils a lot in my work. I'm kind of attached to them now because at one point I realized that these fossils were living creatures in the world millions of years ago, and something happened and it sort of permanently kept them in the rocks. So the narrative of these fossils, they each have their own story to tell. Behind these 3 photographs, I have air, water, no, there's the water, fire, and something else. But I wanted to combine all those elements. And I've used the 4 colors, the 4 directions, and these colors come from the Dakota myth. It's not a myth, but it's their culture, and it represents Lakota culture. But I like to think that using these colors, it represents nationalism and unity amongst all nations living in North America. And I call it History of the World because to me, it's about what was taken off of North America and what happened to the resources that were taken. So I think it's kind of a straightforward series. This piece here is called War, and it's kind of truncated from another series I've done called La Pietà. And La Pietà talks about war and resources again. And in this one particular piece, it's what gets destroyed in times of war. And it's really the bodies of young men and the resources that is really attacked when war happens. The series here, this is another ongoing series of portraits. And this portrait series is called The Beauty of Nature's Wild Children. I'll come over here. And it's about taking photographs of friends and family. And it's about spending time with people that I really like and setting up the camera, setting up the lights, talking to them, spending time with them. It's an exchange, really. And I like to think that when I take these portraits, they're exchanging some of themselves, and hopefully I'm exchanging something of myself with them. After the portraits are taken, I've made a smaller version, and I've given each one of them a portrait of themselves. And I just think it's about strength and the desire to continue down a path of joy and discovery in the world. And like I said, there's 6 portraits here, but I would like to just continue on. Sadly, this one portrait is of Sam Thomas, and Sam passed away about 2 months ago. But I think it also shows his desire to live with joy as well. And I don't know if anybody else knows who the people are in these portraits. This Raven, that's my granddaughter. She's here somewhere. And Ruth Cuthand, who's a good friend. Elwood Jimmy, who also lives in Toronto. Anise, Abby Cushane, Sam Thomas, like I mentioned, and Wanda Nanabush. And the Moon series. I'm kind of addicted to taking photos of the moon, and if I'm awake, I will go out there and try to shoot it. Sometimes they're not great photos of the moon, but it's something I really enjoy because it's done through the middle of the night and it's quiet. Sometimes you can hear coyotes off in the distance. I think they're coyotes. Kind of, they're scary sounding, but it's just an obsession with myself. And then I think, this moon is for everybody to enjoy. And I really am bothered by the fact that companies, corporations are sending up equipment now and they're landing it on the moon. They want to colonize the moon for their own benefits. And this really, it really bothers me, as I'm sure it bothers everybody else. But I just want to sort of capture images of the moon while I can. So it's really kind of a short description of this moon series. The fossils that are behind you called Resting with Our Warriors. I've done large portraits of these fossils. I've spent many hours again looking at different species embedded into rock faces. And I am not a paleontologist, but I'm curious about the life that existed before and during the era of the Big Bang. And I find that I want to invent the narratives that these things must have been living through. And now they're the centerfolds for explaining my own existence as I slither along the edges of the century. And I just like to think that these are all our ancestors, and it's evidence of where we came from. There's a painting behind you called A Trillion Years Ago. In elementary school, we were taught don't pick or step on trilliums. And I use the trillium here to emphasize how educational and governmental institutions wisely promote the idea that these delicate flowers blossom once a year. However, they need gentle care and consideration whilst in the wild. They're part of the ecosystem in this part of the world since Genesis, and I question myself, If we're programmed to look after these beautiful buds in the spring, why can't other issues be addressed? Beginning from, or from the beginning, schools have that power, and kindness could be one of those supreme offerings embedded into our psyche. And I don't think we would forget if it started that young. There's a photograph over here called Nature's Scream. And this is a photograph I took of a tree just in a Brantford park. And I came home, developed my film, and then looked at it. And then I went back to, I was going to look at it again, take more pictures, but I couldn't find it. So I don't know. I'm so happy I got that one. There's a sculpture in front of you right here called Ouch. And find Ouch. It was designed to be on the floor, but just for safety's sake, it's been lifted up on a table. When I started to think about creating a piece of work that speaks about love, this was for a show about water and love, using water as the conduit to express love, I immediately thought about native reserves in North America. When I was a young girl living on the Six Nations, we were occasionally warned to boil the water before we drank it, water which came out of a well. As we swam in the Grand River, we had to wash off that water from our bodies. Eventually, we weren't allowed in the river at all. Water was not to be trusted. We lived rurally. Industry was miles away. Big cities also seemed to be in another universe. Still, we were affected by growing demands on the ever-growing progressive activity surrounding us. As I become more aware of how water is affecting mostly isolated Native communities, especially those in northern parts of Ontario and the rest of Canada, I will continue to be appalled by the lack of concerns for human beings who populate that environment. Recently, a few years ago, children from Cat Lake were shown on the CBC as being covered by scabs on their small bodies. Authorities told concerned citizens that they were not being properly washed or cared for. Other previous reports from a different area, known as Attawapiskat First Nation, had similar health-related problems. Children covered by scabs were also diagnosed with improper care. These are just two examples of big industry poisoning the environment and not taking care of its own runoff. The fish in the rivers are not healthy, and the wildlife are also suffering. With Ouch, I want to bring attention to water and how it's used, abused, and ignored. We all need good, clean water to live and enrich our lives. And like I mentioned, this work was included in an exhibition for the Yoko Ono exhibition at DHC Foundation in Montreal. And she wanted pieces of work that used water as an element in the work. I think that's it for here. We'll move to the other section. Here we have Raven at night. Here's Raven during the day. This photograph was taken when Raven was 12 years old. She had long, long hair. And then she said, I want to cut my hair. So I said, nope, you're gonna pose for me first. So a friend of mine had these bushy things there, so I took them from her and then I laid them out, took photographs. This is actually made up of about 4 photographs. And then had Raven, I think you were on the ground or on the floor or something. So had Raven lay out, and then we, pulled her hair out, and then took many shots. Took a shot of the moon, which like I've said before, I'm obsessed with, and then star images as well. I'm not a great astrophotographer yet, but it's something I'm going to work on. I was recently at a presentation of a friend of mine, and she was talking about the stars and the sky above and all this, and she had really beautiful photographs in her presentation, and she said her brother took them. So after the presentation, I went to him, I said, I really like your photographs. And he said, oh, I took those with a Galaxy iPhone. And I said, what? Because when I take night sky shots, it just looks like dust. But he said that he works in a really dark environment, and he just made it sound like it was like, oh yeah, I just took my shots at night. And I said, oh, okay. But I'm going to hunt him down and find out what he does. So, because I really want to work on that too. So this is Raven at night. Yeah.
I'm really curious. What is there a meaning behind having these like things?
Yeah, well, it's using these little branches. They look so scattered, and the shape of them and the rhythm that they create. I just thought it creates this kind of mystery, and I'm always about mystery at night, so I just thought it lent itself to not only nighttime but also Raven's hair. That's no longer there, as you can see. But it's really being playful with the materials at hand. And it's something that I really like doing, is like just finding objects that you have right in front of you that you can use. And it's a challenge. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question. I'm going to take a drink here. Thank you. This piece is called the Brantford series. Most of these photos in this series are inspired by objects that I found in junk stores and antique stores around Brantford. The photos that form the Mohawk Chapel A and Mohawk Chapel B, these two here, were gifted to me by my friend Jeff Stern. And he told me he found these photos in his father's archives after his father passed away. But I just love these because here, there's kids coming out of the Mohawk Chapel, which is very close to the residential school there, and they don't look so happy. So I just thought it really is indicative of the time that was going on. This photo here, there's a little girl here. She has a big, big smile on her face. And to me, that kind of gives me hope that, things weren't all bad. So just looking at the photos, I just want to focus on her and say, well, she had a good day that day. This photo here of Joseph Brant, it comes from an installation in downtown Brantford. And this photo here, it's only about maybe the size of this paper, but it's part of another installation that was presented by the Daughters of the Empire. And I think it was that happened around 1912 or something. It was pretty early. But I thought having Joseph Brant part of this installation really says a lot for the town of Brantford. And I found this piece by accident. It's a perfect little sculpture, and have always enjoyed looking at it. And it's of Joseph Brant, and he carries so much contention in the area. He is both hated and loved, because there's 6 Nations, and some people say, he sold everything and he just looked after himself. And then there's the other part who says that he was looking after other people. He was looking out for people and not just himself. But it's just an argument that continues to go on. This is a medallion I found in one of those junk stores. And it's only like this, not even, it's like that big. But I think it says so much in the object itself. It's 1661, New England Company Incorporated, and above the Indian guy it says, "Come over and help us." And it's like, well, who's receiving these? And we know what they're doing, but I just find it's kind of ludicrous, and it's such a good little medal to have. I just love it. And then there's the beaver nickel, and I really wanted to have beaver fur to work with for a while. I kind of obsessed over how am I going to get beaver fur? And then again, I went to a antique store and there was a really beautiful beaver coat, and I bought it and I cut it up, and I really dreaded cutting it up because it was like it was so well preserved. But I thought, no, I need this coat, so and I need to cut it up. But I put a nickel on top of it because it sort of represents or reminds us what the beaver went through, decimated, totally cleared in Canada, but now they've made the beaver the hero in the nickel. So I just wanted to, I use a lot of these as reminders to myself because sometimes I think it's easy to forget history and the purpose and, everything that, how Canada was made and what Native people have had to go through. This one is, again, it's, we all come from the stars, and it's fossils mixed with images of the starry sky overhead. And when you start looking at stars and you start hearing about people, and there's evidence that we do contain the same material that the stars contain. So I just wanted to bring those things together, and it's about ancestry and the world. Kind of a big statement about where we are from. This work back here, forget the title, but this is an ongoing series as well. And I like finding things, and I like making objects out of them. In this case, I've taken some rocks again, and I've made like little houses for them, and I've sort of separated them to say, this looks like a Henry Moore to me. And I just love the way the shape. And if you have rocks around you enough, you can really start to feel like there's a personality there. And even though they're rocks, they almost feel like organic living creatures. And then, of course, I get a little bit carried away. And then I find other objects. And then it's like, okay, time to just put that one away. And but I think that's about it. I think that's all I have to say.
Well, one thing that I forgot to say was mentioning your show.
Right.
So until the end of May, Art Gallery of there's a large retrospective of Shelley's work, and it's the largest exhibition Art Gallery has. It's also the largest catalog they've ever done. And this exhibition is very much the tip of an iceberg, in that none of this work is even included in that exhibition.
That's right.
So, and tomorrow afternoon,
Yes.
your recent feature-length narrative film called Cafe Daughter is screening tomorrow afternoon at
The Westdale in Hamilton.
Westdale at 3?
2:45.
2:45.
Yep. Yeah.
So I strongly recommend you go and see that.
Yeah.
If you have questions for Shelley,
Yes.
you can ask them now, or she'll be around for a bit longer this afternoon. If you feel more comfortable asking one-on-one instead of group, you can do that as well. But feel free to raise your hand and ask.
And you can ask me anything.
I don't see a hand, so I'll thank you right now.
Oh, thank you, Stephen.
I'll put this over here for people that want to see it.